Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. We have some things to discuss. Two games last night. A very interesting hire by the Philadelphia Flyers. Some potential suspensions in that Edmonton-Vegas game. One is up in the air because it's the player safety is going to review it. The other one is supposedly a definite, but they could pull it back depending on circumstance. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Start us off the pre-show, Russ.
So let's talk about the NFL schedule. The Jets schedule is out. The hype is already there. So I want to tell people right now, the Jets will be 17-0. So there's no reason going through the schedule and saying, I wonder if this will be a win or I wonder if this will be a loss. They have Aaron Rodgers now, and they're going to go 17-0. So the Bills will be in just another stepping stone onto the Super Bowl. So I want to make this very clear right now so that we really don't have to talk about it at all in the offseason.
Jan, your thoughts on 17-0?
Well, I saw Russ's tweet earlier and I purposely ignored it because I knew he was being sarcastic, but he's kind of removed the fun of the old Mike Francesa, Chris Mad Dog Russo. That'll be a win, Mike. That'll be a loss. He can look. The NFL has figured out a way to make a schedule release a 3-day endeavor, which is pretty impressive, and get a whole bunch of eyeballs on top of it. So kudos to them in terms of turning this into a dramatic event.
Jan, it's torturous. I mean, just release the friggin' thing. They got to make a show out of this goddamn thing at 8.
I don't even care. Honestly, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't care, but diehards who are crazies. Look, I'm interested just to kind of see who they play. Well, let me rephrase that. We know who they play. I'm interested, obviously, to see when they play. I'm kind of interested to see in terms of the number of primetime type of games they get, because clearly that's a evidence of their increased standing in the league. Look, Detroit's on a ton of times this year also, including the first game of the season, which nobody expected. So that gives you an indication just what the schedule makers think what is going to come out of Detroit this year.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, and you know who's the most excited about the schedule announcement are the radio stations that cover these teams, because this is going to be programming for the next 4 weeks. Well, let's look at the order. I mean, they're already let's look at the order. The Bills going to play on week 17. Oh my God, it's just droning on crap. I mean,
I do want to say this. Like, I think in the past, Jan, you're right, and based on the team standing would be how good they think they are. They don't care how the Jets do. They just care that they're Aaron Rodgers. They have Aaron Rodgers.
Of course. Of course. Absolutely.
The Jets could crash and burn with Aaron Rodgers, and they're happy to talk about that too.
That's why you have the flexible schedule as well, right? I mean, that's part of the reason at the end of the year, right? You have that flex option, because there were a couple of games, and I think there was some Monday night games that were about as stinker could be last year, and They on the broadcast they remarked even how bad some of those games were. So
yeah, we got to fix your audio a little. It's really staticky.
Yeah.
Okay.
People are having a hard time.
I'm not sure I can do. I'm unfortunately I'm in the office, so there's only so much I can do right now.
Yeah,
depending on the cell service I got, I'm not on Wi-Fi.
That's fine.
It's not unintelligible. But but this is the thing, and I don't know if I buy this, but. Russ was saying, well, the Bills are getting the Jets at the best time because it's early in the season and Aaron Rodgers will not have familiarized himself. And he's under a Nathaniel Hackett offense. So he's played under that before. So I don't think, he's going to have chances during training camp and the preseason to get used to his players. I don't think it's going to really affect them that much that it's week 1 instead that they're playing the Bills instead of week 6.
I'm going to tell you it does. You know why it does? Because history tells you, and this is with really any Jets quarterback that has ever gone to that city, regardless of who the personnel is and who the coaches are, it's never a smooth week 1 with the new quarterback. Never, ever, 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 ever. I can't even tell you the last time the Jets got a new quarterback, whether it's a supposed superstar like Brett Favre or this, and they were great week 1 right out of the gate. Can you remember that, Jan?
Well, the difference is with Favre, remember, he came in August, right? So it was a little bit different in terms of timing. Here, Rodgers is going into a system, as Mike kind of pointed out, that he knows already, presuming Hackett maintains a similar system as Green Bay. B, he has the benefit of a full training camp with the team, which certainly won't hurt necessarily in terms of in terms of getting acclimated to his teammates, etc. So, but no, I mean, it's rare. I mean, look, I mean, more times than not, it's been a number one draft pick. Darnold started week one. I think Sanchez started week one. I don't. The only one I think who may have been Pennington. Might have been the only one who might not have started week one of guys who've recently gone in the first round. That's. I mean, Wilson went in round one in week one, so not necessarily ideal in terms of who they've put into the role. Just given the fact that those guys were just trying to learn how to sink or swim in general, let alone being a veteran presence to understand how offenses and defenses work.
I just saw this little thing, and before we start the show, PK Subban's dad apparently is part of a group in Ontario to get gambling ads banned from NHL games. I'm sure his son can inform his dad that this is a cash cow for the league, and part of the cash cow is advertising on games. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's annoying as all hell to watch FanDuel, DraftKings, Bet365, all these different ones, but you're never getting these ads banned. I seriously doubt that they're ever going to limit these ads on these games.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's as you mentioned, Mike. It's a cash cow, right? It's a revenue stream. We've used the term, I think, in the past that the leagues are in bed with them. It's clearly created some down, at least not in professional sports. The downstream risk has been, we saw what happened with Calvin Ridley. We saw what happened with Williams from Detroit, but that was more so for Williams that he was actually betting on team premises as opposed to placing the bet itself, which lends itself to a whole nother sense of irony already, as you talked about. We can have the advertisements there, but you can't bet in the facility, which I get. But if he's not betting on the NFL or he's not betting on anything that he has a direct impact to, I'm not quite sure why we've held that out to be the standard bearer, that you have to be off premises to do the betting. But the NHL now is basically just making money hand over fist with these relationships, and they're not getting any smaller, right? They're expanding in terms of how many people or how many other betting streams that they're going to have.
Yeah, and when you have Connor McDavid and Wayne Gretzky doing a Zamboni race on MGM, I mean, come on, we know
it's a losing battle. I do want to go back. So I went and looked it up, Jan. Even as rosy as a year as 1998 was, where the Jets only had 4 losses, they lost the first 2 games. So I'm telling you, it is burned in my mind how normally the first week goes, even with all these other things we're talking about. So I don't have high hopes.
Well, I'm thankful for this, at least the preliminary reports, and we'll find out. We'll find out at 8:00 tonight. But last year, with all the things that the Bills went through in terms of natural events, and I'm talking about playing week 2 or week 3 in Miami in 90-degree heat and players dropping out of heat stroke, and then Miami coming to Buffalo and it being a blizzard. Thankfully, the NFL has recognized maybe you should play in Miami in December and you should play in Buffalo in September or October. Gee, what a shock. So that thankfully they realized that the odds are better of having good weather early in the season in October in Buffalo, and then good weather and nice, a destination where Bills fans can go down to Miami and watch a game in 70 degrees.
It doesn't snow till like November, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, we've used the same argument in Major League Baseball, right? We've always said that the cold weather teams, most of them should open on the road, at least initially, for the most part, maybe for a series or two, because of the fact that you avoid, hopefully, some of the crappy weather in the Northeast, and then make up for it down the road when you have better weather here, as opposed to worrying about whether or not you're playing in a southern locale or a western locale. You could do that earlier in the season and just balance it that way.
Well, Michael K. And last point of this, Michael K. has made the point about the Minnesota Twins building Target Field without a dome or a retractable dome. And if they ever made the World Series, late October, early November, it snows in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
You could have a snow out, or you could have 30-degree temperatures. That's just the reality. You can have a cold spell, but you could have a snow out in Minnesota if there was a World Series. And then,
don't worry about them making the World Series. Seriously.
Yeah, Carlos Correa is doing really well for them, isn't he? Yeah. Okay, let's start the show. Hello,
Russ, we have our own problems right now, Russ, with our team. So I'm not making fun of Minnesota right now.
I can't say anything. Half the Yankees are on the IL. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, May 11th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Jan Levine, and happy that Mike didn't have to look at a calendar to get a date right.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We'll be joined by Kevin Allen in a few minutes. Okay, let's start with the news that the press conference that's going to happen tomorrow. But the news, actually, I think, was one of the first people who had it.
He is.
Yesterday was that Keith Jones was going to be named team president of the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, Keith Jones has long been a broadcaster, and NBC, Comcast, and I think he was doing TNT games. He's been doing TNT games. So he's going to be leaving the broadcast booth or in between the benches to be the president of the Flyers. Russ, he doesn't have any kind of managerial experience, but he is he's a good communicator. But the question is this is not just a communicator job. This is a job of hockey operations. And to my mind, this means it's all going to be on Daniel Briere.
Yeah. So, look, I saw Keith Jones last Friday. We had a nice conversation. I know him a little bit, and he's a good guy. I want to get that out of the way because I am not going to let the fact that I know Briere and Keith Jones and they're good guys color the fact that there's no experience in this front office. There's none. And so I don't know how you expect, and again, good communicator is a percentage of what the hockey ops job is. Now, if you're going to put all that pressure on Briere, that's great, but he's now a GM that has no NHL GM experience or ASGM experience. Like even this year, he wasn't technically, he kind of was, but at any rate, there's just not enough requisite experience for me to tell you that I have any kind of faith in this. Now, I've seen some Flyers fans' arguments. Well, we've tried the normal route before and it's failed. No, you haven't tried the normal route because the normal route has always been too many people have been connected to the Flyers in this process. Even Chuck, who worked for Bobby Clark, was very connected to Flyers in this process. Now it's all Flyers again in this process. And I'm not saying there aren't good people in the building, but what I'm saying is that you get this tunnel vision and it's not a good thing. I've seen it happen in other organizations and it's not a good thing. So,
well, Jan, let me ask you this.
Just glad handing it. I just want to say just glad handing it and having names and having good press conferences doesn't equal winning hockey.
No. But the thing that first popped into my head, and maybe I'm off base here, Jan, but okay, so now you have Keith Jones, no managerial experience, Daniel Briere, limited managerial experience. There was a thought process to getting away from the group, the Bobby Clarks, the Paul Holmgrens, the Dean Lombardis. They're the ones with the experience. So you would think that they're probably going to fall back on those guys, even though the thought process was to sort of get away from them, like the Edmonton group was, getting away from the Edmonton Mafia. But I don't think that they're going to get away from the influence of Bobby Clark and Holmgren and those guys.
So it's interesting. So, right. So Keith Jones got the role, but he beat out Olchuk, right? So I'm wondering, would we be saying the same thing if it was Eddie Olchuk, who really lacks the requisite experience also, right? So clearly, right? So secondly, you have to wonder now, right, Briere has limited experience and Jones has no experience. Granted, he's been around the team for years and understands how the team operates. Doesn't necessarily make him a talent judge. Same thing with Briere. So you wonder, will they look for some kind of an AGM or somebody within the front office that is maybe not necessarily looking to move up the ranks, but willing to be a veteran sounding board to kind of help these guys get settled into their day-to-day operations. Somebody who has a good overall understanding of how management structure as a whole should work. And then point number two.
That's happening, Jan.
Yeah, sort of like Lawrence Gilman was.
Yeah, I don't believe that's happening though.
Right. And then point number two, what is this? Now they remarked in the press release about Tortorella and the experience that he has. How much willingness is Briere going to have to basically go toe to toe with Tortorella, given the fact that he lacks that kind of experience, right? What does Tortorella bring to the table if things are going south? And look, if you're going to revamp, you might as well go whole hog and really revamp and bring in a younger coach if that's really the direction in which you're going to go with. Because this year with Tortorella, I'm not quite sure that any of us could say was a positive direction forward for the team, unless you want to establish to a certain extent what the expectations are overall. But I don't know whether or not you would say that a lot of players gained or became better this year. Maybe Konechny got better. Maybe there's a handful, but I don't think necessarily we'd call it a good year in Philadelphia, and whether or not Torts is the right guy moving forward.
Well, Russ, this is the thing that's interesting, because immediately the dynamic I'm looking at with now Pryor and Tortorella reportedly are on the same page right now, but the dynamic here of a new, young, inexperienced general manager and a veteran coach, that sounds like Dubas and Babcock in Toronto. And we know how that went. After about a year and a half, Dubas said, "You're not listening to me. You're not, you're trying to exert control. You're gone." I'm not saying that Pryor is going to do that, but they really have to be on the same page. And we know that Tortorella is going to exert some authority here because he's got the long-term contract and the big money.
Right. Right now he is the power broker in the front office. He has the power. We'll see what Pryor is able to get done with John. But John's the power broker. Did John make the Flyers harder to play against? Sure. So if you're going to call that a success, that's what they're actually calling a success, Jan. So that's fine, but you only can get so far in that area like John did with Columbus until you either make the playoffs or you don't, because look, the Flyers say they're going to do it the right way. They say they're rebuilding. They're not showing any of those key things that they're actually doing that yet. So I'm not holding my breath until they actually really do them. Mm-hmm. But as far as the way this is all set up, the way this front office is set up, and the way it's set up with the coach has a lot of power. The front office is going to be there to, say what they know and charm the fans. And I still believe that they're lacking, and they're probably the least experienced front office in hockey now. And my thing is, if this were my business, I would have to bring in somebody that has some experience in turning around a franchise, instead of worried about, hey, this is a new direction that we're going in, because they need turning around, and they're not turned around yet.
Kev, we're talking about Keith Jones being named president of the Flyers, with Daniel Pryor now the permanent general manager. And I brought the fact that, okay, like Russ just said, the lack of experience there, we know that Jones is a good communicator, but the question is now you have that influence group of, now Dean Lombardi is still there, Bobby Clark, Paul Holmgren, former general managers. With the lack of, and John Tortorella being a big money head coach with a strong personality, I just wonder about the dynamic here, and whether like Tortorella or that the Flyers mafia will exert some control or some influence over the inexperienced group that's now in place.
Yeah, I think those are all fair questions, and I came in the tail end at Russ, but I think I probably agree with him on all this. I really liked his statement about it's the least experienced, management group, in the league today, and that's true. The lesson we learned in following the Buffalo Sabres is, sometimes you can be wrong with that. I don't think any of us like the idea of Kevin Adams taking over. Not that we didn't think he could be a good general manager, because there was a lot that that he had to offer, but it just didn't seem like the timing was good. There was no one there to kind of guide him, and he did make some mistakes, but he's actually been pretty good. So I guess in that regard, we have to give the benefit of the doubt. But Danny Briere, to me, I feel the same way that I felt about Kevin Adams. I don't know. He may end up being a good general manager, but it seemed like he really isn't ready. So you would have thought they would have brought in someone above him who, you wouldn't feel as worried about it if, he brought in a Brian Burke or a Ray Shero or somebody like that. Now, saying all that, I am bullish on Keith Jones. I do respect the fact that, experience does matter in all this, but I've known Keith a long time. I think he's a really, really bright, hockey guy who understands the league, understands what it takes to win. Even his playing style when he played was conducive to, he was a team guy. He sort of understood how to, it works in order to be successful. So, I like the hire. It's just all that together. And with regard to that, I don't know that the Flyers Mafia, as you called it, actually has as much power as they used to have. I think Keith there will be fine. I think he'll have to, the guys he has to worry about is, how the corporate people feel about him.
Sure.
So I don't think that'll be it will be interesting to see how that group gets along with Tortorella, because Tortorella certainly will try to manipulate them. That's just who he is. So, and I don't know, maybe everybody in that position would try to manipulate them, but I think Keith has qualities that give him a leg up in that situation. Like, I think he can manage up and down. I think he has that personality. So, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I think it's fair. It's fair to question whether this is the right structure for a team to have two inexperienced guys.
It's really three, because Dan Hilferty, who's coming over, isn't a hockey guy either.
For who now? Who are you talking about?
Dan Hilferty, who's coming over from Comcast, who is the guy watching over everybody else, is not a hockey guy either.
Yeah, but generally those guys in the NHL don't have a hockey experience anyway. That's so fair. That's, so they don't usually go in that. So it's just really the two guys you have to worry about. And, but, it's going to be, they've set themselves up to be criticized if it doesn't work out. I
just look at it this way. I showed a few friends the other day, and Kev, you would know this person, Jim Lights. So you look at Jim Lights, right? And he had held presidency. He's held a lot of different positions for the Dallas Stars. But you go look at him, and he was like the head of marketing. He had a lot of other things going on other than being a good communicator and a former hockey player. And so it's like, and I don't even know if Lights played at any level. I really don't know that.
He did, yeah.
Right. So, but he is what really is supposed to be in that position, and he did go up the ladder like that, and has been very successful. It's a long shot for me to have it be successful the other way.
No, but he's a different kind of president. Like, Jim Lights would not be a good fit in the Keith Jones role that he was hired for.
Well, maybe 10 years ago he would have been. I'm not saying now he wouldn't.
The president there's now the presidents of the teams, and then there's president of hockey operations. Those are two different type of roles.
Right.
And I think, I wouldn't compare him to Jim Lights. Jim Lights is an all-purpose president. Market. Keith Jones is not going to be doing any marketing. He's just going to be on the hockey side of it.
Brendan Shanahan has been team president with the Leafs since 2014. He doesn't even live in Toronto full time. He lives.
Yeah. So I think that's a different role. So I wouldn't worry about that.
But Keith Jones is president of hockey operations, though.
Yeah. No, but that's
some of that does fall into play. Like, there is some of that in the job description. Like, hey, there is a business application to this job.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Just think about when the Pittsburgh Penguins changed their structure. Like, there was Morehouse, and then there was Jim Rutherford as a GM, and they switched to, they still have another guy that runs the business side of it. Brian Burke did more because he had some background in that, but they've kind of split that now. That's kind of the new kind of thing. So
I know, and like in Buffalo, I think the criticism of Adams, and we'll move off of this. The criticism of the hire of Adams was that, and I understood this from the Pagula's point of view. He was their guy. He was part of the Harbor Center management. He was somebody. He was part of the coaching staff going back when they had first taken over the team. They liked him. He was their guy after Ted Black and Jason Botterill and all the people who had been recommended to them by the NHL. They decided they were going to go with their guy and not take the advice of others. And it was a scary point for Buffalo and for Sabres fans, because he was unproven. And like you said, Kevin, did make a few mistakes, but he hit it out of the park on the Eichel deal. He hit it out of the park on the Sam Reinhart deal. He's made good trades. Their draft record, at least in the first round over the last few years, has been excellent. So, we'll see how it translates with Briere, but it's an uncertainty right now because there's no experience.
Yeah. You just, you plant seeds of doubt when you make these kind of moves. But sometimes you got to be bold. There are people who have been very successful that didn't have experience when they started, and they somewhat learned on the job a little bit, like Kevin Adams did, and have done really, really well.
Yeah, and I will say I will miss Keith Jones on the broadcast because
we all will. He was great.
Yeah, he is good.
I see him every game, but it's just again, I have to just look. Remember, John Tortorella, things that I see too, Kev, like John Tortorella in his last press conference was already talking about how the Flyers would handle free agency and how they would handle this. And there's a GM there. You know what I mean? So it's like when you see that kind of thing happening and then you see this, that's what I'm sort of putting all together and kind of imagining how is this going to go when John has this much power.
Yeah, well, we don't know whether he has that kind of power.
But he
talks like that. I mean, historically in the NHL, you've had coaches that, we've talked about this before. Mike Babcock, after he became Mike Babcock, he tried to, have a say, but he had a strong general manager in Ken Holland in Detroit.
Right.
And Joel Quenneville used to do things.
Just to hold it there. So by strong GM, you mean they went toe to toe a few times.
Correct.
Yeah. And that was the reason. Sorry.
Yeah. And then in Chicago, Joel Quenneville would, Stan Bowman would bring players in with trade, and Quenneville simply just wouldn't play them. And that's how
Trevor Daley. I don't like him, so I'm not going to play him.
Yeah. So
John's the same way. I mean, John.
Yeah. But, you do ultimately have control, and, corporately owned teams, I find their general manager or their director of hockey operations have a little more power because they, for some reason, don't mind eating money as much as, the single manager ownership, so.
Well, that was the whole motivation back in 2015 that you had Mark Hunter and Kyle Dubas as inexperienced assistant GMs, and the talk was they were going to make one of them the GM, and instead Brendan Shanahan brought in Lou Lamoriello to be the buffer and to be the sheriff with Babcock. And they tangled for a few years because, remember, like guys like Frankie Corrado, he picked him up off of waivers, and Babcock refused to play him, or Justin Hall refused to play him because these were guys that he didn't want to play. And eventually when it became Dubas, he wasn't going to take it anymore, and he said, "Okay, you're gone." So, I mean, that battle between a general manager and a coach, if the coach thinks that he can exert some control, like Tortorella might think. I think right now they're on the same page, Kev. But, if it gets acrimonious down the line, who's got the power?
Well, I would think it will be the president, because I think corporate would back the guy they hired. Because in theory, they didn't hire Tortorella. That was Chuck Fletcher. So I think they would, since they hired Keith Jones, I think they would back him. But, it depends on, how the fans react to both Keith Jones and Tortorella. I think right now Tortorella is in a honeymoon phase in Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's still in the honeymoon phase. The other thing, and I asked Pryor about this, that I was surprised at was no change to the scouting group whatsoever. Not going to add anybody. Now they may subtract, after the draft, because all teams start making changes then. But that was also another surprise, because if I came in, if nothing else, I would have somebody look over, somebody from the outside, what we've been doing, even this year, what the plan is, if that's a good plan or a bad plan, and they're just going status quo with that too.
Moving forward, even?
No, they didn't say moving forward, but right now this.
Oh yeah, but you never historically you do not make changes before the draft.
No, but the Leafs did. There have been teams that have done it.
Well, but it's not very often.
Yeah,
teams don't like to do that. You like to go to the, and then that's why always, the day or the week after the draft, there's always a lot of. People are, the word spreads around that so-and-so got whacked, and, because it happens right after the draft. But, what they don't want you to do is take your list.
No, I get it. That's why I wouldn't have fired anybody, but I might have added somebody, a consultant.
It's hard to, guys you would want are tied up to other teams. So
And the only reason the Leafs did it in that situation, Russ, is because Dubas was a former OHL GM, and he had connections in the OHL, and he wasn't going to draft any of the guys that Mark Hunter drafted. They had a completely different draft philosophy.
Yeah, but like as an example, I could bring in Chris Pryor. He's no longer with the Penguins. He was a really good influencer with the Flyers for a long time. He's been with the Penguins, so you can bring him and let him, be a part of it.
But maybe the Penguins have him under contract. I know they fired him, but maybe
yeah. I just don't think it's a good look before the draft.
Right.
I most of them, Keith Jones and Briere have usually the new thing. They come in, they make changes, throughout the organization. So you end up bringing, the equipment guy you like that you've had.
Yeah.
You bring in, several scouts that you've met along the way. Now, the one thing that is a little different here is Danny Briere has been here already. So I'm sure he has relationships with some of these people, and some of them I'm sure he likes and some he doesn't. So it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Okay. Let's talk about the two games last night. Start with the late game because a lot of stuff happened in that game and at the end of that game. The Edmonton Oilers evened the best of 7 series 4-1 over the Golden Knights. 3 goals in the first period. They really sort of ran roughshod over them, and then it was basically. I don't think Vegas could. I watched some of the game. I don't think Vegas could really mount enough of an attack to get back in the game, but it got ugly at the end of the third period, as it normally does in these playoff games, Kev. We saw Evander Kane pulling his stuff again, running Alex Pietrangelo with about 3 or 4 minutes left to go in the third period. And then Pietrangelo on Leon Draisaitl. The only thing you could say is that he was doing his best Paul Bunyan imitation because he dropped the stick, swung the stick on Draisaitl's wrist.
I thought it was his arm.
They said it was his wrist. I heard wrist.
Looked arm on the replay. I don't know.
Yeah, but okay. Whatever it was, I mean, it was a pretty blatant.
But I mean, in terms of whether he's going to be long-term injury, I'd rather have it on the arm, the meat of the arm, than the wrist. So
sure. Now he's facing supplementary discipline. He's having a hearing with the NHL Department of Player Safety. I don't know. I mean, I saw it. I thought it was pretty blatant. Knowing,
I think it's an easy call. I think
it's a game, yeah. 2 games.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's one game, not 2.
One game.
Right.
One game.
Now, the interesting thing here is that Darnell Nurse gets called for an instigator late in the third period. He runs Nicholas Hague. There's a fight. It gets the instigator penalty, and that's an automatic 1-game suspension. Okay. It is likely a 1-game suspension, but the people online have been saying, there was a fight between Alex Burrows and somebody else and Chris Russell in 2015, and there was an automatic 1-game suspension that the league rescinded. So it's not guaranteed that Nurse gets the suspension, but I have the feeling here, if Pietrangelo gets suspended a game, they're going to suspend Nurse a game.
I'm with you. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. It makes it easy for them to suspend him because of that, and everybody loses a top defenseman. So
my worry about this series, though, Kev, we talked about this yesterday. So clearly, like we talked about before, now at least we see Jonathan Quick in a uniform. He doesn't seem like he's going to play. And if this is Aiden Hill's team, they're going down quick. I mean, no pun intended. They are. Aiden Hill is not up to the task.
He did not.
I mean, which goalie do you like the least?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, I like Aiden Hill less than Quick. At least with Quick, I'm going to roll the dice that maybe there's something.
Oh, no. I meant, did you like Skinner least? Or, I mean, because,
Oh.
Yeah, so.
No, but I think I like Skinner more than I like Aiden Hill. I mean, at the point where you have Aiden Hill and you're fighting for your playoff life, you're in trouble. You're drowning.
Yeah, I can't dispute that. It's not like he's got a pedigree. So
no, he doesn't have pedigree, and he wasn't strong in the first period. But I mean,
strong.
Russ, you let me get my point out here, please. Jesus. No, the thing here is that we don't know. I mean, Quick has not played since the middle of April. He's not played since I think the first week of April. So you're talking about a month that he's practiced and whatever. Doesn't sound like he's hurt. I mean, it's at the point now where, do you want to bring in a goaltender who's rusty than a goaltender who did play well in Game 3? He did not play well in Game 4. I mean, I don't know what Bruce Cassidy's going to do, but he seems like he's going with anybody other than Jonathan Quick. Eck said it yesterday in our group text. It's like it's almost getting silly now that they're not going to Quick.
Yeah, there's something going on there. Yeah, I mean, there's no trust in him whatsoever. I don't know if it's, his attitude, if it's his. I just have no idea. I mean, because you would think they would consider, because as Zach points out accurately, it's not like he doesn't have some history of performing well. So, I think logic would say that they would be giving him a shot if there was not some reason. So something's going on here.
Right.
And, who knows what it is. But
I do want to counter the argument that, like, Quick hasn't played lately. Like, Lester Patrick didn't practice all year or play all year. He came in and won a Stanley Cup.
We're not.
That was 1927.
Whatever, but it happened.
I mean,
yeah, I don't think that has to do with it. I think there's something else going on.
No,
like there's really, it just seems like they have just totally.
It's odd. The whole thing is odd.
Yeah. So.
And the other game last night, the Maple Leafs survived for another day, a 2-1 victory over Florida. Now they go back to Toronto for Game 5 tomorrow. I'll be at that game. Now I'll say this: it was a good effort, an energetic, desperate effort. I mean, their backs were against the wall. They played really good defensively. Joseph Wall was not severely tested, but he made the saves that he needed to make. And they blocked a ton of shots. Kev, it was a good team performance. Yep. They got 2 goals out of the core group that hadn't scored in 3 games, so that was positive. They seem to be embracing this us against the world mentality. Mitch Marner basically coming out after the game and again saying, I don't care what you guys are saying. And that's fine if that's what gets them through the day and that's what motivates them, that and that's what works. That's great. But the funny thing is that the narrative that we talked about yesterday with 1 victory still hasn't changed. Now it's like, well, if they win 2 games and they go out in 6, then maybe Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe say. It's like the line keeps moving, the ball keeps moving. So it's like, I don't know what to think about that, but I'm just talk about the game itself first.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good effort. Do we know whether Eklund put the $40 down on them to at least win the cup?
Nah.
So it would have been
I said we should have bet for last night's game, even though it wouldn't have been a big return. We'd have won something.
He put it towards the Taylor Swift ticket.
I think it was, I mean, it was plus 185. So if you would have got, if you bet $100, you got 185 back. So
I'll take it.
If you would bet on Toronto, so
I'll take anything you can get.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I thought Toronto played well, and I mean, what I thought last night's game to me was more representative of what the games I thought we were going to see at the start of the series. I mean, I thought it was going to be those type of 2-1 games where, the fact that the Maple Leafs have weapons, more weapons, would be able to help them, and that's what happened. I mean, they were able to get, as you said, to get key goals out of guys that should be scoring key goals. So, but nothing really has changed. Now, Florida's still got to win 1. I thought it was interesting afterward. I read both the Toronto and the Florida reports, and they all talked about how light and airy Paul Maurice was after the game, which I found kind of curious about it all. So,
usually he's very good with the media, but usually he's a little caustic. Sarcastic sometimes.
I mean, I'll say this about the game, and then I did have one more subject for Kevin. About the game, I felt like the Leafs were playing do it or die defense because Wall was in there.
Yes.
And so, like, you saw that they were trying to limit as many shots as possible.
Sure.
And it limited their offense a little bit, but it was enough for them to win. I don't know if they could win 3 more games that way. Like, it's a hard effort way to try and, like, get back in this series. We've probably seen in the past it's probably too hard to keep that up. But I give them credit because they did it the right way yesterday, and Florida got back into it late, sort of. But they did a good job of handling it. But yeah, I just think it's a big mountain.
And I know it's okay. I know it's a common refrain from people on the losing side or not analyzing a team when they lose about officiating. It gets boring after a while. But I will say that Florida has sort of insulated themselves by the way that they play. They sort of like the referees now expect them to be a little cheap or a little aggressive, and they almost accept that. Like yesterday, Leafs get called for a penalty. Radko Gudas runs in from the blue line and destroys David Kampf in the corner, so much so that Kampf had to go into the Leaf locker room for the concussion spotter. No call. And at the end of the game, Sam Bennett runs Morgan Riley and a couple, and then there's the pile on at the end of the game, and there were no penalties called. I almost get the feeling, Kev, that because we expect that out of Tkachuk and Bennett and Reinhart and Montour and those guys, that the referees are almost desensitized by that, and they almost allow it to happen because they expect it to happen from Florida.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. Yeah, I mean, there were some penalties that I thought should have been called, but to me, it just seemed more like a playoff game, a tight game, and we all know subconsciously it feels like they call it different when it's a close game, and so I don't know. I thought it was just a good hockey game last night.
Yeah, Bob was keeping his team.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good game, and I agree with Russ. I mean, I said that the previous game that where it just feels like the Maple Leafs play completely different with the young goalie in there, and they did it again last night, but it worked out. It's funny, but there are coaches around the league who would watch that and saying, that's how you're supposed to play the Maple Leafs.
Right.
Like you're supposed to, try to keep the shots, dangerous shots down and all that. Like when you do that, you win.
They lost games earlier in this series playing sort of irresponsible defense, like or making plays like inside the blue line, that you can get away with during the regular season. But in the playoffs, when you have four checkers on you and you make a drop pass inside the blue line and Gustav Forsling ends up scoring a goal, that's what kills you. One error kills you in the playoffs.
I want to answer the chat room. That hit by Gudas was a good legal hit. There was nothing wrong with that hit.
It was a charge, Russ.
Oh, it wasn't a charge. Come on.
And it was after the whistle for one thing.
Well, I don't know if it was after the whistle.
It was after the whistle. Trust me. I'm telling you, it was after the whistle.
It was a legal hit. He's not getting suspended.
No, he's not getting suspended. He should have been penalized, a minor.
Yeah, they rarely call charging in the playoffs.
Yeah. But, okay, so we have two games tonight. I just looked online to see if there was any indication of who the New Jersey Devils goaltender is. It's like, are they going to call up David Ayers, Russ? I mean, it's like I'm wondering, is it Schmid? Is it Vanacek? Is it Blackwood? I mean, they can call up Nico Dawes.
I think they're going to go back to Schmid, but
I don't think
there really is no indication.
Right, that's the thing, Kev.
Yeah, I really don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny though. I mean, you have to give Carolina a ton of credit with no Svechnikov, with no Teravainen, and obviously, Pacioretty was never really a factor. With Aho, sort of like, maybe not 100% because he's been, he's been abused in the first couple rounds. They're a well-oiled machine. I mean, Jordan Martinook is scoring goals and piling up points. They're just a team that's getting scoring from a lot of different areas, and they're just efficient.
Yeah, even though they were cast as a team that was going to have trouble scoring goals.
Right.
So, this has been such an odd playoffs. Like, pretty much this panel hates every goaltender that's still left in the playoffs.
I don't hate
Otters are the only ones we like. That's it.
I don't hate Ottinger. Yeah.
You don't hate who?
I don't hate Jake Ottinger. I think he's one of the
best.
Oh,
no, Ottinger is good. But we've even, pointed out he's had a couple of bad games.
No, we pointed out.
Yeah, he's had a couple of bad games. So, Ottinger hasn't been Ottinger. But
there's no Patrick Waugh in these playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you hate the Carolina goalies. Skinner, is a rookie, just tied Andy Moog's record, but he's a rookie. You hate the Vegas, goaltending group.
Yeah.
Bob's played well.
Yes, Bob's played well.
But it's just been an odd, this playoffs goes against everything we know about the playoffs. It's it's supposed to be all about the goalies, and this has been nothing about the goalies. So, again, Bob has been important.
Bob's been the one standing.
Right.
Again, he's been the one rock, and he's going to have to get his team through it.
Yeah, Bob's allowed 2 goals per game every game, so that's on most nights that's enough. That's good enough to win.
Yeah, even in the playoffs. Yeah,
even in the playoffs. The other game tonight, Seattle-Dallas series tied 2-2, going back to Dallas. Dallas, after falling behind 2-1, won pretty decidedly in Game 4. I picked Dallas in this series, so I think Dallas is gonna win tonight and take the lead. But again, Seattle. Everybody has underestimated them, and they've just been resilient and gotten good goaltending from Grubauer. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Seattle win.
I'm going with the Seattle win tonight because Jared McCann's back, and I think they're going to get a spark from that, and he's their best scorer. And I just think this series is just destined to go 7. It's just one of those that we don't think it should, but it just looks like it's going to. So I think Seattle is going to win this one.
Yeah, look how the playoffs have changed. In the old days, you'd be talking about, like Lemieux and everything, and now Russ just said he thinks Seattle's going to win because McCann is back.
Yeah,
Jared McCann. Who wasn't even on anybody's radar. Now I know he was the leading scorer this year, but before this season, he wasn't even on anybody's radar. So
it may sound ridiculous, but
no, your point is well taken. He was their guy. He was their go-to guy. This season. So. Yeah,
it is funny,
but it's just how it's changed. So
one other subject, Kev. So with Matvei Michkov, I'd seen a lot written about it. The one thing I can tell you, his talent hasn't changed. His talent is the same. You talk to scouts; they know what he can do. They know what he'll be able to do in the NHL. The matter is just when you can acquire.
What's he going to get here? Yeah, now that 26-27, that's a long time
scenario. Yes.
That's the problem with it. We're used to, and I know some people have said that that's how long it takes for prospects to develop anyway, but not with a guy of his magnitude.
No, I mean for a guy his magnitude, they usually come quicker. Except Kuznetsov didn't, Kaprizov didn't.
No, well, Russians are different, and that's why they probably don't always go right where they should. Like he might fall a couple of spots just because, he's going to land after some of these guys lose their jobs. So,
right. But sometimes you do have to. So my question for you is, yes, sometimes you do have to just look for what's best for the organization too. And he definitely will fall a couple spots, but I don't know. I can't foresee him falling past 6 or 7.
No.
Okay. And so GMs are all going to say now that they don't have a problem taking them, but then when it comes to draft day, a few of them aren't going to take them, right?
Yeah, that's so well put, because that's exactly right. They're all going to say the right things. Oh yeah, well, you're not picking for now; you're picking for years on the road. But when they're faced with a guy and they're thinking, yeah, but I can have him in my lineup in 2 years,
right.
And this guy, I mean, just because that's when his contract's up, we don't know if he's coming that year. He might sign an extension. This war could drag on forever.
Mm-hmm.
So all that stuff.
Well, the interesting thing here, and we'll talk more about the draft as we get closer to it, Russ. But it seems to me that the common narrative is that the draft will start at 4. That it's going to be Bedard, Carlson, and Fantilli, or Bedard, Fantilli, and Carlson 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is where you start to say, okay, who's going to be the next pick? It could be Will Smith, it could be this guy, but we don't know for sure. And that's all the drama will start at 4.
Yeah, even though someone did tell me, and I can't discount it because I heard little rumblings last year and I sort of discounted it with Slavkovsky. Someone did tell me that he had spoken to at least one GM that might take Carlson second, and who knows if they actually would do it when it comes to it, but I don't think it's outrageous. So I think there's a little bit of drama, but not a ton. But yeah, once you get past 3, because technically Mitchkov could be 3 easily, like based on his talent. But then everybody's going to start to figure out and extrapolate, like Kevin said, what is our real long-term plan here? Are we going to wait for him? We're not going to wait for him. So he is going to slip a couple spots that way. But I do think, and I don't think anybody's trading up into that top 5, and I don't think anybody's trading down in that top 5. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there are teams that have Carlson second, but I don't think they're sitting in second right now.
Correct.
But I could be wrong. I mean, the one thing about Carlson is you're hearing people kind of mumble things like, he might be able to play next season.
Yes.
And I say this all the time, and some GMs scoff at this, but the ones also know that there is something to this. You're always selling hope, when you're a rebuilding team. And if you can put that person in your lineup and let the fan base grow with him, it can be helpful, depending on, and sometimes ownership appreciates that. So if you're Anaheim, I mean, Fantilli is word is he's going back.
He's going back,
yeah. Hello. So if that was the case,
he's not going to say it though, Kev. He's playing coy right now, but he's going back. But Dvorsky may be the other guy that you could put in the AHL right away, see how he does. Same thing with Carlson. Maybe there are teams, but you're right. I don't know if anybody's sitting. I don't know if a team sitting in second is thinking that way. But you're right. It could be a team in 10th. Saying, if I had second, I would take Carlson. Maybe that's where that came from. I
did ask a general manager straight up, if you were just taken based on talent alone, how would this draft go? And he said it would go Berard, Fantilli, Carlson, and Mishkov. He said that's how it would go for him. Yeah, he said he likes the skill level of Mishkov, but he doesn't offer the same package as Carlson.
No, I mean, that part's true. If you're getting, and I have my rankings the same way. It basically, with Mitchkov, if you're getting him, you're hoping he's a 90-point guy. If you get Carlson, you're okay if he's a 75-point guy because he's also big. He's also going to play good defense. He's going to do other things.
Yeah. I mean, I saw him at the what's that called? The Czech hockey. Whatever it was, the tournament. And I mean, in tight.
The Holinka Gretzky tournament?
No. This was in the pre-World Championship. Carlson's on the national team.
Yeah, so he played with Raymond on the national
team. Right, he did.
Whatever they're calling that.
I mean, there was 123 people in the slot, and he took the puck in to the slot and made a couple of moves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it looked like Tokyo at rush hour.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 people there.
No, he's great at going through traffic. That's his gift.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. So
it looked like Tokyo at rush hour before it got.
I don't know what they call that game. I don't know what it is called, but I know he played with Raymond and he was playing, and Raymond looked good too in it. And I don't know what it's called either.
Yeah, that's Czech hockey. There's a third word for it, something. But anyway, hey guys, I got run. So
how are you guys?
Thank you.
Yep. See you later.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin.
So, I mean, we talked about the Flyers thing. We could circle back.
I'd like to talk about that for a second. Yeah, just real quick. I'll be there tomorrow as well, Russ. So see you.
I won't be. I have my my mom's got to get an eye checkup really bad, and she has to get a surgery. So I'm gonna have to watch it online because the timing's not gonna work.
So because it sucks. Good luck to her. Good luck to her.
Thank you.
I know all about that.
Oh yeah.
I know family comes first. You guys know that. All right. So, which is why it's just shocking that I might actually be there tomorrow. Anyway, I didn't hear your opinions on it, but I'm going to guess.
Okay. So guess it. Yeah.
All right. Inexperienced.
Mm-hmm.
Showy, like a little bit like, cause he's a popular guy, and this will be, the fans will be happy about this.
Yeah, like a charming kind of thing. Yes.
Charming guy. Yeah.
Good communicator. I put
communicator, right. Players will like the fact that they're ex-players.
I mean,
I didn't say that. But yeah.
I know that was a positive thing, so I guess you probably didn't say that.
Yeah, no, none of us said that, but okay.
All right, so what did I miss?
The other thing I'll add to that you didn't know is I said they are now the least experienced front office in hockey.
They are.
Yeah. And And I brought up the fact, and Kevin sort of shot it down a little bit, but the fact that there's not a lot of experience there. I mean, does that really mean that what I called the Flyers Mafia, the Clarks, the Holmgrens, Dean Lombardi, who's not part of that mob, that they will not have any kind of influence or control?
That's an interesting take, Mike. But I can tell you that these guys are not part of that clique. Okay. Russ is gone, but these guys are not part of that clique. Like that's a different group, and I think that's a good thing because these guys are. I mean, this is what I'll say. Obviously, it's inexperienced. You're right. I mean, there's no question. You can't sit there and say that either. None of this hockey ops. Obviously, they're going to bring in more people who are hockey experienced.
Sure.
Both are very smart as far as that goes.
And one of the things that we all said was that it would be a good idea to bring in a veteran sounding board as an assistant general manager, sort of like what Lawrence Gilman was in Toronto for Kyle Dubas. Right. If not to say Ray Shero, but if somebody like Ray Shero was willing to take an assistant general manager's job, or somebody like that,
he did not like this job for some reason.
Right, but not Shero. But if there's somebody out there who's a veteran assistant GM or somebody's,
I think that you see that, and I think you might even see like a different, like this is president of hockey ops, and the president is technically the guy from the board on the Comcast thing. But I wouldn't be shocked if we saw another president come in as well. They're all about this team concept. Briere's experience, although very light, he knows what he doesn't know, which is a good thing. Like you talk to people who, I hate people like there's so many GMs in the league right now and assistant GMs in the league right now that'll BS you because they think they know something. But then there's the guys who you really trust, and Paul Holmgren was this way, and I wrote some articles today. Paul Holmgren got a lot of respect throughout the league because if you asked him a question and he didn't know it, he was like, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out and get right back to you. I have always respected that in people, just in general. Like I would rather just sit. And Holmgren was very good. He would get right back to you. He'd find the answer out. I think Briere and Jonesy are similar to that. But also, Briere has a very, very strong relationship with his former agent, Pat Brisson. Very strong. Like, and is way more. I mean, they're friendly beyond just player agent type thing. He's told me many things, different things about. How smart Brisson is, how great he is, how he thinks he's one of the best hockey people out there, how Brisson was going to be the GM of the Canadiens, but decided he didn't want to leave his agency job. And instead Bergevin took it, which was Brisson's recommendation.
Right.
So when you talk to a guy who talks to a guy like Brisson, you're talking about a guy who he's beyond just your normal like ex-hockey player. Like he's very smart and very obviously he looks like he should be Paul McCartney in Beatlemania down at the shore. Like that's what when you see him, he's not big. He doesn't look like an ex-hockey player, but he was not big, and that's why he almost didn't make it in the league in the beginning because no one thought he could play. Then he almost took two teams to a Stanley Cup. Mm-hmm. So Jonesy is a totally different character than Briere. In that he's more of like the farm kid. He's but the thing about Jonesy that you will never worry about is the work ethic, like on this guy. Like Keith Jones, and people who aren't in Philadelphia don't know this, but Jones was part of the morning team on the AM Sports Talk radio station here. Like he would be, so that would be like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. And as you see, Jones, works the Flyers games, flies back with the team at night. Often works, for NBC or ESPN or whatever, and ends up in different places like that. And yet, I would be amazed because I would watch these games. I would fall asleep, and I would wake up, and he was on my radio live in the studio in Philadelphia. This guy just does not stop. Right. Like he's ridiculous. I'm gonna post my original Flyers Buzz TV show, which is really funny. Like the one I did for Comcast. My original one, I interviewed Danny Briere on the first episode, and had a segment with Keith Jones. This is really funny. I mean. I respect these guys, and listen, they aren't experienced, but they do have something that hasn't been here for a while, and that is that they are winners, and they are also people who have Jonesy overcame a lot to get in the league too, and also is super intelligent. Like people forget that Jones saved Eric Lindros's life, in Nashville. When he found Lindros in the bathtub, and hurting, and he's like, you have to go get your spleen checked out, and Lindros's spleen had exploded. So it was crazy. I mean, if that doesn't happen, if Jones isn't rooming with Lindros at the time, who knows? This is a smart guy. He's a goofy guy, but a smart guy. And I think that there is a connection to the way for what it's worth, I often pine for the days of Ed Snyder, maybe more so than I should have, but I knew Ed, I got to know him, and I knew what it was like to have a guy who really wanted your team to win, and really also just wouldn't take any crap. And if someone embarrassed your team, you traded them immediately. It doesn't matter how good they were. That kind of thing has been missing in Philadelphia for a long time. And, like I had said in my article, the Big Bad Bruins are still the Big Bad Bruins, but the Broad Street Bullies are dead. Right now, that doesn't mean that you have to push people around and fight people. It's just the Big Bad Bruins means more than fighting, as we all know.
It's a mentality.
It's a mentality, and it's something that they used that thing called the Flyers flu. You remember that from the 70s? When the Flyers would show, when teams would come into Philadelphia, the players would be sick because they didn't want to play in that environment. It's just that environment. Holmgren was a part of that, but Holmgren's not an outward guy at all. Like Holmgren's not a great PR guy. I heard him laugh like 3 times, I think, in my life. And it was really funny, Holmgren, when he laughed, because it was shocking. Like, when he'd actually laugh at something you said. And I tried to make him laugh because I sat like right next to him in the press box several times. I tried to make him laugh, and it was a joke. Could I make him laugh before the third period? He was just dead serious. Where Jonesy and Pryor are not dead serious. They get it. They get what fans are about. They get that this team has been taken over by apathy. I have a text chain, which I wish I could share with Keith Jones over the last several years, where I've texted back, and here's, a guy doing television over the Flyers, and I've texted to him and I'm saying, like, this is pathetic. Like, what the heck is going on there? And in the commercial, he sending me back to, yep, I know Ed never would have gone for this. The things like you said to me, and he said to me in those little text chains that I wish I will never release because they're private, but that would give Flyers fans a lot more confidence than they have right now. Now, I'm proud that the people at Comcast saw this enough to make this move, because they have been completely oblivious to this concept, with with people they brought into Philadelphia. Now, will it be successful? It can't be worse, right? And that's a horrible way to go, right? Mike. But anyway, I think it'll be interesting for sure, and I think it'll depend a lot on who they bring in to work with them for sure as well, especially in the scouting world. They need to be smart with that, and they know that. But that's why, like I said, Pryor having connections with Brisson, it could be interesting to see what happens there too. I'm not saying Brisson's going to come work for the Flyers, but
no,
he'll definitely know the right people who can help. Like, he'll know, these are people that people know. So we'll see. I'm going to go. We'll see how it is.
Maybe a guy like Mark Bergevin, if you're talking about in terms of a general manager, or somebody who's a former general manager who might be willing to take an assistant job.
There's a guy. I mean, and Bergevin is there's a lot of that personality. Like, make no mistake about it, Pryor is a French Canadian kid. Like, he has.
And wasn't Bergevin the GM that brought Pryor to Montreal?
Absolutely was. No question about it. And and the French Canadian coach there is the one who drove Pryor out of it.
I mentioned him. That's right.
But there's a lot. But there's Pryor likes to know what's going on with the team. I know that for a fact, and I know I've heard some great stories. Like a story they used to tell me when he was with Montreal at that time. So the coach was our friend Terrian. Also JJ Daigneault, and Gerard Gallant was an assistant coach at the time. So they would sit at a table when the team would have their meals. They would sit at the table, and Briere liked to sit next to the table, because he liked to hear what they were talking about. Just the strategy wise, he would sit close to them, and not where everybody else was not. But he liked strategy. He liked to hear what they were thinking, where they were going, and he also did that so he could translate to Gallant what the other two said, because the other two would sometimes speak in French with Gallant there and not speak in English, which was infuriating to Gallant. he's like, I'm an assistant coach here too. These guys would go back and forth in French once in a while, like just purposely keeping Gallant out of it. So there's a connection with Gallant and Pryor too. I'm not saying that means anything, but I know that they're buddies. So who knows how this plays out? There's a bunch of ways to play out, but I thought it was interesting enough. I definitely wanted to come on and just talk about it for a second with you guys, for sure. Even though I had this came back from this thing. Can I also talk a second about the Leafs Panthers game, Mike?
Sure.
Can I hear your thoughts on it? Because I know the rest of the world tuned in for that.
I said it was a good workmanlike effort. They showed a level of desperation and energy. They blocked a lot of shots because they had an inexperienced goaltender.
Yeah.
And their core players actually scored. And that, what Game 4 showed is a complete difference from the first 3 games in the sense
Right.
that they, their core guys needed to do what they did in game 4 to win
Right.
1 or 2 of the games. And now they finally realized that, but the problem is now you're down 3-1.
Yeah.
And, you're still behind the 8 ball. You're still not, Florida's still not feeling any pressure. They can go and play, fast and loose in game 5. And the pressure of being at home will be on Toronto since they're 1-4 on home ice. The pressure only starts to swing on Florida if the Leafs win on Friday.
Yeah.
And it goes back to Florida 3-2, and Florida says, okay, well, if you lose this game, we're going back to game 7. So, like I said, call me when it's game 7. Until then, Russ.
When I wrote an article years ago when the Flyers were down 3-0 to Boston, explaining how they could come back, and they did, but me and the optimists, they always write how they can come back. So there's many times I've written how you can come back, and they have.
Remember in that series they lost Krejci in game 3, and they never won without Krejci.
Right, and that was a big thing because Mike Richards hit him skating across center ice. I remember watching clear as day live. But I said that I believe that there was an advantage to a team when they were down 3-0 that didn't have home ice advantage, where the Leafs have home ice advantage. And I think that I don't know that necessarily plays into it, because that game 7 is going to be, if you're coming back 3-0, is going to be by far the hardest game to win, because the pressure if you get to 3-0 and you blow it at home in game 7, that's a big, big deal.
And also I said this, it's because, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick were talking about the fact that, they're down 3-0. And if they lost in 4 straight, it would almost be worse if they lost in 5, because they would have come back to Toronto and lose another game at home. And that,
right. I remember you said
losing
that.
in 5 and losing in 4 wouldn't be the difference in terms of the heat on Dubas and Keefe. But if they got to 6, then maybe they would show that, okay, they just fell behind, and, they lost to the better goaltender and all this. And I don't know whether losing in 5 or losing in 6 makes much of a difference.
I think it does, because I think it's always good to win your last game at home. The reality of that is your fans leave remembering a win, which is always a good thing. Like, I always feel, I've been to some Stanley Cups, where a team loses the Stanley Cup at home, and that's always a tough thing to swallow, but I've been to other Stanley Cups where they've, like, I was in the Edmonton Carolina Stanley Cup, where I went back and forth through those seasons. I was in Carolina thinking that it would be over in 5, and remember it went to overtime and Edmonton scores the goal, and then I have to fly to Edmonton, spend everything I had basically get to Edmonton, and I'm in Edmonton, and they win that game. And the party atmosphere of winning that game 6 was unbelievable outside. I mean, that's a great memory for those guys. No matter what happened in game 7, I'm thinking to myself, that is something. Like, when you win that game 6, I was at the greatest game I ever went to as a fan. My greatest memory as a kid is the Flyers winning game 6 against Edmonton in '87. Like, that send, when the 3-goal comeback in the third period, that sends it to game 7 against a team that no one thought the Flyers could beat. So the reality, so those are great memories. Yeah, I think that is better to win your last game at home. So I think winning game 5.
Right. I mean, no doubt. But what I'm talking about is the ramifications of what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. And the funny thing is, in the last 24 hours, it's like the report came out that Mike Sullivan is not being thrown overboard in Pittsburgh. He's got as much power in Pittsburgh.
No, because he has Crosby. He has got Crosby, and that's the reality is.
Right. So this talk about Dubas and Keefe going to Pittsburgh, it's bunk. The thing, I think MLS is going to offer Dubas an extension. Yes. I would be shocked if he doesn't take it, because I think there's unfinished business in Toronto. I think the only ramification here is that Keefe has got another year left in his contract, and maybe they don't extend him, or maybe they only extend him a year. But I think if there are going to be changes in Toronto, if they lose in the second round, the changes are going to be to the roster, and those are overdue. I mean,
you can't really question Dubas on many of the changes he made. They were good changes. I mean, the only changes I would question is and we have this debate. I don't want to get into it, but it's goaltending. Like, that's the one you can guess on. You can say, okay, he did take a little bit for being a Stanley Cup contending team. He took a little bit of a reach.
But it was the lesser of two evils.
Right. You think it's the lesser of two evils? I'm not saying if they re-signed Campbell, that was the answer either. If they were going to be a Stanley Cup team, they really needed to do something bigger.
And now if they think Wall could be their future number 1, or at least a 1B, and you've got him signed for less than $1 million for another 2 years, that's really
a huge piece. That's a huge piece, and that helps them. And like you say, the money's easy for that. Murray could be a solid backup. Samson could be. I would probably have Samson as a backup, but instead of Murray, or there's other backups out there. If Wall's going to be your guy, and Wall seems to every indication he does a lot of little things that I like it just as a goalie that I haven't seen the Toronto goalie do in a long time.
He's a good puck handler. He's a good athlete.
Yeah, you know where he really impresses me? The one thing that not enough goalies do, and actually Bobrovsky does this too, is shots from out far. When you see a guy set up for deflection, the way to play that as a goalie is to go right to the guy who's deflecting it. Because if you're right up against the guy who's deflecting the puck, it doesn't matter which way the puck goes. Like, it's going to hit you.
Right.
If you stay back, it could deflect either way, over top of your shoulder, underneath you, whatever. So I've seen Wall do this where he sees the guy who's going to deflect it, and he basically charges, plays the angle right on top of that guy.
Right.
Bobrovsky does it too. It's definitely something that Vasilevsky didn't do. And we see that kind of this is something that's really good. I mean, this is a 3-1 series, but it still doesn't feel like a 3-1 series to me. And I know you don't want me to curse them, but I didn't curse them because I said they would win and they won. But the reality is this: these teams are pretty close. They're pretty even, and there is so much riding on confidence in both directions. If the Panthers lose their confidence, they get blown out in Game 5, for example, for some reason. Say Toronto comes back and blows them out. It's not necessarily the best thing, probably, because for Toronto, because then maybe they get overconfident going into Game 6. But it's hard to be overconfident when you're facing limitations. So I think that, I think that this Game 5 is a scary scenario for Florida, and and I think that at least not getting swept is enormous. That matters. Because if you did just against Florida, who they won the first round last year, to Florida, people forget Florida beat Washington in the first round last year.
Washington, yeah.
Yeah, they beat Washington in the first round, but then they got swept by Tampa, which everybody remembers. That's what they remember about last year, So I really felt like that's what people are going to remember in Toronto too, if they got swept. And I think that if they lose in 5 or 6 and Florida goes on to win the Stanley Cup, it's a little bit excusable.
Right.
We'll see how that plays out. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I appreciate it. I know it's late. I appreciate just talking fast, but thanks for letting me on. Sorry I wasn't here. Thanks, guys. Thanks for jumping on, and thanks Mike for everything. And we will probably not do a show tomorrow.
No, because
we got this press conference, and you're traveling to Toronto.
Yep. And
so we will. If anything, we'll shoot. Just keep an eye out, see what happens. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun weekend of hockey. I mean, we're going to know a lot by the next time we see each other on Monday.
Yes.
We'll know everything, basically. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you on Monday. Enjoy.